without further ado, I think I'll just go into the report that we came here to see. Now, tonight we'll present this debt report. I want to give some background in the fact that this debt report was actually released, completed the week before the budget debate and presented to policymakers that week so that some of the thoughts and findings could influence that debate. After that, we got fairly caught up in a lot of other debt consultations happening both here and internationally. And so it's at this time we've decided to present the debt report here because a number of other developments have happened. One, this whole discussion about debt relief for middle-income countries. I see representation from the Association of FinSac Entrepreneurs, etc. So felt that this was the time to have this debate. I've broken up the report into 3 parts. How this happened, why debt is important, and how we can fix it. Now, CaPRI doesn't say that we have all the answers, but we did run some scenarios and we have clues as to what we think will work. Here we have our public debt levels from 1995 to 2006. Now, in 1996, we were 76% the debt GDP ratio. We choose to look at that ratio because if you apply that case to the ordinary person, if you owe $1 million and you only earn $200,000, you have a problem. If you owe $1 million and you earn $5 million, it's not a problem. And so it's the same thing with regards to countries. How much do we earn, i.e. our GDP, and how much do we owe debt? We were at 76% debt GDP ratio in 1996. By 2003, we were at 147%, an increase of 71% in 7 years. How did this happen? How did we get here? Well, this was what our debt growth each year in that period looked like, with the killer being in 2001 with 22.4% alone increase in that year. And this is us breaking down that 71, that's breaking down the 71% debt. Now, it's one thing to talk about debt, but there are a lot of different kinds of debt. We know that you can owe a loan shark, you can owe a credit union, you can owe a bank, and these all have different implications in terms of the time period that you owe this money for and when you have to repay it. So we also realized that we had to look and see what kind of debt does Jamaica actually owe. Now, our debt is broken up into 2 parts, showing us that one, the debt that we had previously keeps affecting us because of revaluation, etc. And then the new debt that we add each year. Now, there are a number of categories there, but the one that we should watch is that Jamaica has a basic balance, and that's what a lot of us don't understand. What central government spends on programs and wages is less than we actually collect in tax revenue, and has been that way at least since 1996. But yet we're still indebted when technically we have a primary surplus. Because there are other levels at which we are paying out, interest payments and debt absorption, which refers to the liabilities coming from hurricanes, and also refers to things like JUTC, dare I say the name, or Air Jamaica, Sugar Companies of Jamaica, and it sounds like a newsreel for 7 o'clock news. Now, we said, well, if we're going to talk about debt and to be know-it-alls and decide how you should address debt measure, then we should see which part of the debt is growing. So we broke it down and looked at the different categories. Now that was 1997 and this is 1998. And we realized that the general trend had actually changed with this debt absorption part increasing, and it just continued for that entire period. realizing that debt absorption was one of our major drivers. We also had another one of interest rates, but that's interest rate payments on what we already owe. You can renegotiate them, but there's not as much you can do with it as with debt absorption. Debt absorption refers to the debt coming from an Air Jamaica, JUTC, a Bank of Jamaica, and FinSAC, as we see, that spike continuing from 1999, culminating in 2001. Here we have attributed what actually happened with the debt absorption. Now that second bar speaks to what percentage of GDP each of these three categories, FinSAC, public sector companies, and the BOJ accounted for. Again, we can see the FinSAC trend. 2.5 in 1998, 22.7% of GDP in 2001. The point is that non-central government debt seems to be the root of our problem, and that's the one we need to be watching. That's not, while it does get talked about, it's not the one we hear a lot about. We hear about, debt relief, etc. But the absorption of non-central government debt is definitely seems to be the root of our problem. So how then do we deal with that? No, to the average man, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there was no, why is this important? Why do we even want to talk about this? Isn't this a government problem? Why then do we have to sit down in our room after a hard day's work and talk about this? Because it affects us, not only in terms of us being a highly indebted country, but it affects the social indicators of this country. In the world, Jamaica is the fourth most indebted country. Actually, we actually have a lot of company in that category, with 14 Caribbean countries being in the top 30. But Jamaica alone, of the other Caribbean countries, is the one that's there for absorption of non-central government debt, while the others are there for fiscal slippage, basically, that they actually spend more than they earn. Our problem is particularly big in that the debt is 1.5 times GDP at a size of US $14 billion. Now, that means that even if everything we earned in 1 year was paid out to our creditors, we'd still be indebted.